Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Own It with Rakesh. Welcome back to this product management series at Own It with Rakesh. Hello, everyone. In this video, I look forward to sharing my experience of being an API product manager. I'll try to distill all that I have learned over the years in this presentation, in this video. We'll explore the world of API, short for Application Programming Interface. We'll explore the world of API product management in a very simple way. APIs play a very crucial role in modern software development, and we will learn why they are so important, from understanding user needs to creating a strong partnership with the developers. We will cover all the key aspects and provide you with particular tips which is very practical for navigating that API landscape. So let's dive right in and start with this presentation. What is an API? We all know that an API is short for Application Programming Interface. We recognize how important APIs are in the modern software development, especially as applications scale to millions and billions of connections. The traditional client server architecture doesn't work anymore given the amount of scale that everybody is looking at. And that's where APIs come into picture. If I have to mention few advantages of an API, even before we get into API product management, API simply serves as a medium as communication between multiple microservices. It essentially creates that ecosystem of platform as a service, connecting business directly with consumers, connecting businesses with businesses. Since API has variety of endpoints that can be configured, it makes it easy to extend it and integrate with other platforms. Essentially, what API does is it provides access to any application's data and logic. And with this access, you can monetize the potential of the collected data that you have. You can even enable integration and extension of new features for your business. Yes, API acts as that medium which lets you connect with multiple microservices, which lets you connect with multiple businesses. The same API can be extended to other platforms and you can have a variety of new features. So API is that application programming interface connecting multiple ecosystem of services. Now that we have a good understanding of what an API is, I don't want to get into the technical details of an API. Rather, I want to go ahead and talk about the different API types that are available to us. So the various kinds of API simply is we have open API, public APIs which is freely available for anybody to access without any constraints. Then you have partner APIs which are custom designed for your business partners. You also have private APIs which is mostly used for internal communication, internal integrations. And you also have something called as the composite API, which execute a series of REST API requests in a single call. It's a composite of multiple APIs. So where do we see all these APIs in our daily lives? APIs in popular company are some as listed on the screen here. As a product manager, we need to pick and choose APIs based on requirements. APIs have become a crucial part in product management. For instance, in 2019, Salesforce acquired MuleSoft for almost $6.5 billion just to get that API management ecosystem. And more recently, Visa also agreed to pay over $5 billion for Plaid for its API integrations. You know how Stripe is growing exponentially with its API payment offerings. It's a great API product. The sudden interest in APIs is essentially driven by significant growth in cloud computing, enabling rapid development and focusing on key business needs. As you can see on the screen, some of the popular APIs that we use on a day-to-day basis, for example, we use Google Maps for a lot of navigations. So Google Maps basically has a lot of API endpoints, understanding the traffic in a given area, understanding what are the different locations, what are the timings of a particular business that you are navigating towards. So these are all multiple APIs stacked together and bundled together as a good offering as a Google Map. Similarly, you have APIs for making reservations at hotel. You have APIs from Priceline and Expedia for making bookings on flights, rental cars, and even hotels. And some others are like even when you're trying to log into a particular system, you'll be given options to log in as a Google user or as using your LinkedIn profile or using your email address. They're all different buttons available on the screen, but at the back end, it's mostly APIs which is enabling and powering them, integrating multiple systems with each other using this API interface. So as a continuation, API product managers sit between API producers, who are your developers, and API consumers. Optimizing this developer experience and managing the API product roadmap is what an API product manager will be doing. It's a slightly technical role, and understanding how systems and developers interact will be very helpful if you're looking to be an API product manager. Now, let's talk about API product manager and their responsibilities. So, based on the bestseller, the book named Inspired by Marty Kagan, product manager aim to discover products that are valuable, usable, and feasible. Yes, similarly, an API product manager should be able to answer these questions for any APIs that they are working. What makes that API valuable? What makes that API usable? And also, what makes this API feasible for this company? Does it align with the mission of the company? Does it really provide value to the end users? So like I said, API product managers sit between like the API producers and the API consumers. Basically, an API product manager is trying to optimize for the developer experience and helping them manage the API roadmap end to end. Also, an API PM, API product manager, play a role in entire API lifecycle, not just at the beginning, at the end of the API development, but at the entire lifecycle. From creating business and product requirements to understanding the technical specifications, they will be very much involved. They work closely with developers to establish the required standards, the naming convention, what will the endpoints naming look like, and the design principles that needs to be used for that API. And they should also be involved in optimizing the workings of an API. Essentially, a product manager is involved end to end from ideation to optimization of the development process and also like launching it and post launch of an API. If I had to like simply go through the list of things that an API product manager will be involved in the lifecycle, is defining business and product requirements, setting up the best practices for development, plan for access and monetization of that API. Like how are you going to provide access to this API and what is your plan for monetization of this API? And also, the product manager is responsible for developing that feedback channel after launching this API. How will you collect the feedback from your customers or the businesses that are using your APIs? Moving on, let's discuss some key questions and a framework for API product management. It's very important to put a framework because it just makes it easier for end-to-end product management. The first question that you need to answer is, what problem is your API solving and for whom? Clearly articulating the problem statement is very crucial. Then consider how to market and advertise this API. Determining who the target audience will be. creating mock-ups, prototypes, and also providing sandbox environments for this API. So we essentially covered what problem is this API solving, whose problem is this API solving, how will you make this API searchable in the market, what kind of advertising and marketing will you use, what is the plan for providing access to your API, access management, and also what are the security and compliance standards that you are looking at. Yes, granting access to this API is another aspect to consider, which is very critical. Without good access and without a good way to test out your API, it's not very useful for your end customers. Let's continue and look at the checklist of this API products. Now, should the API be freely available to somebody, or is it only invite only? Or do you have some restrictions as to who can access it? Do you want to package it as a service involving whether it's like an API, single standalone API, or a set of APIs which is part of a larger platform? What is the quality of service that you are considering? What are the service level agreements that you want to put forward? These are all very important to think ahead of time. In short, we just looked into what is the plan to deliver this service. Is this a standalone service or a bundled package service? How will you measure the quality of service? What metrics will you use to measure the quality of this API? What kind of monitoring dashboards we use to measure usage, adoption, and any other important KPI that you come up with. So you need to have that analytics and monitoring plan as well. Well, it doesn't stop there. Planning ahead for compliance and changes. That is very important. That is something that you need to think next in the product lifecycle. How do you deal with new changes and how much automation is involved? Technical requirements include deciding if an API management platform is needed and how to handle policy enforcement and security. You also need to think about scaling and performance. You need to take into consideration what is the expected growth and performance requirements that you're looking at when you're deploying this API. Also, understanding the technical dependencies is very crucial in API product management. So in this slide, basically we covered how will you handle new changes to this API, how will you take care of versioning, backward and forward compatibility, how will you deploy it, do you want to implement any kind of feature flags, how will you take care of integrations, the CI, CD, automations, what does the governance look like, what is the security standards that you are planning for, what is the compliance that you need to take care of for these APIs, what are the industry standards of that industry and that API, what are the technical requirements, the high level architecture diagram of how each system and component is dependent on each other. Also, do you have a plan for scale and performance? You need to make sure you have design and decision notes for all of this, the high level architecture, the plan for performance and scale, and the complete security and compliance piece of API development. Now let's talk about roles and responsibilities. It's very important to clearly define roles for API product managers and developers. Essentially, the product manager focuses on understanding and articulating the user goals, the goals of an API, and what pain points is it solving for a customer. Defining the API contracts, the endpoints, the parameters, and even creating a great developer experience because they are your end customers, the developers. Product should clearly define the why, what, and when of that API. On the other hand, the developers create magic with the how part of API development. How can this API solution be implemented? How will the design and delivery be completed? Taking into consideration all that I mentioned previously, the scalability, the compliance, the governance, optimization, so on. Make sure the teams are using the industry best practices as well. It's important as a product manager for you to help motivate the technical team to look at the industry standards and keep the API more scalable. And that way, basically, what you're trying to do is if you're following all the industry standards and best practices, it makes it easy for you to sell your product to your end customers. It makes it easy for other businesses to integrate with your API. That is the end goal, right? Like you're trying to create a great API product, but that API product is only great if it's usable and if it is easily integratable with other businesses and the system ecosystem. So essentially, the API product managers defines user goals, needs, and the pain points. The PM is very much responsible for managing the roadmaps and document how the contracts of these APIs will look like. What does the endpoints look like, and more around like the documentation or like Swagger or the Confluence documentation of the API. The PM should also be able to articulate the value of this API in layman terms to business teams as well as technology teams alike. That way, everybody understands the end goal of this API product. The PM should always be available for their teams, the developers or the QA teams, to provide the business context and help them with the acceptance criteria and provide them the right guardrails to continue with their development work. Like I mentioned, the good rapport between the API developers is very essential for a product manager, especially in case of API product management, because developers are at both ends of your product. Developers are actually your producers of this API product and as well as the consumers of this API product. So it's very important to maintain good relationship with the technical team. And the developers are responsible for making any kind of technical design decisions, implementation, system dependencies, coming up with this end-to-end high-level architecture diagrams, making sure they're pushing their teams to follow the industry standards and take care of the best security measures. And they should also be involved in the cross-team knowledge sharing. If, for example, you might be a part of one Scrum team or one part of one business unit, but your product will be used by multiple teams within the company. So you are responsible for ensuring that you are cross training everybody in the tech team as well if you are part of the API development team. All right, so continuing with the next bit of this presentation, the tips and best practices. Product management is always about striking the right balance between customization and staying true to key differentiators compared to your competitions. So an API product manager needs to treat his API as more like a product than just code. API is actually a product that you're selling to your end customers. The PM should provide guardrails to the developers so that the APIs doesn't become overly complex right in the beginning. So they need to provide clear acceptance criteria to help the developers. It's essential to know when to stop over engineering and maintain focus on the goals of the organization. Yes, we all want to create that ultimate complex product, but is it really going to help and drive our company mission? We need to get started with the minimum viable piece of an API and see how the businesses will be impacted. How well can we perform? Is it aligned with our goals? The focus should be about balancing that engineering as well as the business value of the product. So that's where a product manager comes into picture. Product manager should be able to articulate what are the minimum set of features and capabilities we want in this current iteration or in this quarter or this year. And slowly it can be iterated and incrementally improved to provide more services. But you need to make sure it doesn't get bloated or over engineered right in the beginning. Like I said, the product managers should treat APIs as actual products and not just as a piece of code. So maintaining good documentation for stakeholders and managing versioning of the incrementally improved product is very important. And you should also be able to motivate the dev community to follow scalable modern API standards and protocols like REST and HTTP. That way, it's very important thing that you establish a good roadmap for this API design and development, with balancing all the strategic and tactical tasks. The next important aspect is understanding your customers. As a product manager, you should know who are the decision makers, who are the administrators of this API, who are the actual developers, and all possible personas related to API product lifecycle. Each audience has different needs, and it's crucial to tailor the API to meet those needs. Some examples of customers of an API product manager can look like this. It can be internal developers who consume private APIs for internal integrations. It can be partner developers, basically, or developers from business partners who consume partner APIs based on the service level agreements that we have put across. It can also be third party developers accessing public APIs for extension and customized solution. They are actually your cheerleaders or champions providing good distribution for your API product. Then again, you have the UI teams, the dependent downstream business units, and various other internal stakeholders who can also be your customers internally. So it's important to ensure good feedback cycles are available and have some kind of regular check-ins with technical partners makes it very crucial for maintaining a strong partnership. Breaking down the goals into specific activities and deciding ownership helps in effective collaborations between product managers and developers alike. Okay, let's move on to a very critical aspect, the metrics, the KPIs. It's important to track the average downtime, the error rates, and what is the acceptable versus the non-acceptable downtime or the error rates that you are looking at. And also, you need to be able to analyze patterns in API response times. What is the average response time look like? What is the fast and the slow thresholds that you are okay with? And how does it change over time? Understanding how API consumption changes over time, like when is it consumed more, what time is it consumed less. Also, you need to be able to measure the active users and growth trends in API consumption. You need to look at the spikes and dips through time. Monitoring API traffic based on various segments, like who are your developer types using this API, what is the location from where they are using it, what devices are using your API. There are all different segmentations based on which you can measure the performance of your API. Finally, some useful tools for API product managers include documentation platforms like Swagger and tools for monitoring, also like analytics tools like Splunk, New Relic, and Google Analytics. These are all just a guideline, a toolkit to help API product managers cover their bases. In conclusion, understanding the world of APIs and the role of API product managers is essential in modern software development. APIs drive efficiency, and product managers play a pivotal role in ensuring they meet user needs, solve problems, and align with business goals. By embracing the challenges and opportunities of API product management, we can build seamless, high quality experiences for developers and users alike. Cheers to navigating the exciting journey of API driven innovation. I hope this has been helpful, and I'm open to any questions or discussions you might have. Before we close out for the day, make sure to like, share, and subscribe in any order you choose. Now, own your API product strategy, own your product management skills, own it with Rakesh. Thank you.